Jim, hi. It's great to see you here for breakfast this morning. And as you are our esteemed AWACS of everything legal for healthcare and communication with doctors, I thought we could cover some of our topics this morning. Jimmy, you're mentioning there's a new CPT code for medical access technology fees. Could you talk to us about that?
Yes, I provided a lecture at the AAPP conference in Austin, Texas, and met a billing expert, a medical billing consultant. Her name is Maria Schenbach, and Maria and I were discussing internet access EMR platforms and how they're billed. How do you handle or account for the charge? Are these charges for a medical service? Are these charges for an administrative service? And is there anything in the CPT coding system that tells us anything about that? Maria alerted me to the fact that there is now a CPT code for internet access or for medical records copying, medical records access, medical records anything. You know, it's an administrative code. It's not a reimbursable code. So it's generally understood not to trigger a reimbursable expense by Medicare or by any private plan. The good news about this is that because we have a code now that talks about internet access and medical records access that's generally understood as non-reimbursable by any plan, including Medicare, purely administrative fee, it gives us a nice place to inhabit in the sense that we know now that this is purely an administrative cost, not reimbursable by any plan, and therefore we think entirely lawful.
And legal to charge to patients?
Yes.
Absolutely. So, Jim, on that topic, what about the HSA? You were mentioning there's a tax code, IRS code for medical access, technology access fees.
Well, it's not a new idea to have a subscription to a medical records platform or a medical records type of cost for access. And the nice thing is that the Internal Revenue Code has identified such a subscription as a deductible medical expense. The good news from my perspective in that regard is that that may mean that when patients pay fees to access a computer platform to access their medical records, when they subscribe, this may be an HSA deductible expense because it meets one of the criteria. It is an identified medical expense in the Internal Revenue Code.
Awesome. Jim, this idea of accepting and denying patients, closed practice, open practice, your thoughts on that?
Well, it's an important issue. Every physician is regulated by their state's laws and policies, and since the beginning of medicine, there have been ethical policies and issues about when one must accept or not accept patients, when can one discharge a patient, how and why. From my perspective, I'm seeing the innovations in email, EMR access, and coordinated care as critical components of the current delivery of medical care and provably increasing the quality of care for patients. I believe that this is an important federal issue. The federal government understands that we need to somehow address overutilization of Medicare and government-funded plans. One way to accomplish that is to come up with better systems of communication and electronic medical records exchange. It appears that that actually reduces utilization because it increases the quality of care. Hence, the federal government's policies are strongly urging the medical community to implement electronic medical records access that fits within federal guidelines. What does that mean to me? What it means is that if EMR access, if EMR coordination is an important part of my delivery of medical care, then I as a physician need to evaluate whether I'm willing to practice medicine with technology that doesn't, in my own estimation, meet the standard of care for delivering medical service. So, for example, when the sonogram was invented, I suppose there might have been patients who said, I don't want that on my body, and I'm not willing to pay any kind of fee, copay or otherwise, to use a sonogram. I think at that point a physician can ask themselves if they're willing to continue to work with that patient, if they are willing to practice medicine with less than the current standard for technology. Same could be said of an x-ray. So to me, as physicians evaluate the integration of their EMR systems with email, video conferencing, and other important components that we all know will increase the quality of medical care, are we willing to accommodate patients who don't want to participate with that? I think doctors can look at their own state's guidelines and decide whether they can lawfully decline a patient because the patient's unwilling to utilize a technology that's an important part of their delivery.
Utilize and pay.
Utilize and pay,
Right.
exactly. Because medicine isn't free.
Jim, HIPAA, we're doing some work on cloud issues and physician issues related to HIPAA, open email systems, Skype. Compliance could be a big selling point for us, so could you talk about that?
Absolutely. I attended a HIPAA compliance conference, an all-day conference in San Diego, and had the great pleasure of listening to an author and presenter on HIPAA compliance. This gentleman has been working in this area for several years, has published extensively on the subject, and currently helps some federal government departments do their own HIPAA compliance work. During the presentation, there was talk about whether general email or generalized use of cell phones or text messaging, whether this is all HIPAA and high-tech compliant. And there's some important questions about whether standard, otherwise unsecure systems are actually HIPAA and high-tech compliant. From my perspective, I believe that if we are delivering to physicians a secure, encrypted platform that really does allow for patient-physician communication to be high-tech HIPAA compliant, and by that I mean it has all of the bells and whistles, it has all of the business associate contracts necessary with everyone who has any access to data, then we are helping physicians comply with HIPAA, comply with high-tech. And I think that's really important. I think a physician who's thinking about integrating this system or not should definitely ponder whether their current informal use of technology is HIPAA compliant. It might not be.
Wow. Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.